Get yourself straight, learn how to live free. Addiction is a dead-end road of pain and misery. I didn't know, I didn't know. I didn't know which way to go. The lifestyle I was living wasn't gonna last. I'm lying in the dirt now. I went away too fast. I didn't know, I didn't know. I didn't know which way to go.
Hey folks, I'm Jerry, the sober guy, and welcome to Recovery Today, the only show in the Tri-Cities that looks at alcoholism, drug addiction, and recovery from them. I want to thank Heritage TV for allowing us to have this show on. I think it's well needed and long overdue, and I also want to thank my boss David Hartley, the lovely Amanda, and the crew from Heritage TV for letting us have this show. Now, on our last show, had a great guest, and that was part one, and she's back for part two because it was so good. Folks, welcome back, Kathy Louvin. Kathy, good to see you again, honey.
It's a privilege to be here as always, Jerry.
I mean, we had a great, quick half hour on the last show, and like we said after the show, you got to come back and do it too.
Oh yeah, you can't ever fit, all those good things into one show, or even a lifetime.
No. And what I liked, and I told a lot of my friends that you're in recovery, and you don't sugarcoat it.
No.
You're not ashamed to say I'm in recovery.
No.
Because I live by the old theory that everybody knew Jerry Phillips when he was a drunk.
Absolutely.
And they can know Jerry Phillips when he's sober too.
Absolutely. How am I going to benefit anyone if I try to put my light under a bush?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
speak,
how do you give the gift back? You got to talk.
Yes.
And that's what we do.
And it strengthens us. Each time we share. It's a little like, paying those insurance premiums in, Every time I tell my story or share, recovery with someone else, it always strengthens mine. I walk away feeling a little bit like I cheated on a test, because it just, it's a magical thing. It's carrying the message. And it's just a beautiful circle of new life, that keeps feeding itself.
Yeah. Just for the folks who didn't see part one, can you just give us a little recap of how you got here?
A synopsis?
Yeah, a synopsis. I like that. From the East Coast, we don't use that word too much.
I only saw it on the homepage of the Writers Guild recently. That's a pretty big word for me too. Well, I was, I was born in the Nashville area to a music industry family. Very famous family in the music business, and my family was under bondage to alcoholism and addiction for 4 generations back, I think, as far as I can tell. And along with that came a lot of the characteristics of addiction and alcoholism, which includes, all forms of abuse and neglect and just, uncertainty and fear and it begins, especially when children are in that environment, it began to sort of program my hard drive that this is the way that you live your life. This is how you deal with problems. This is how you deal with joy. This is how you, celebrate. This is how you, lick your wounds, so to speak. Everything in my family's life revolved around alcohol and drugs in some form. So I grew up, with that knowledge,
you already had the built-in aspirin.
Sure.
We get the cure-all for everything.
That's right.
Just take a drink; it'll go away.
Albeit, I started to swear by the time I was 10 or 11 that I will never take a drink, and I will never do that, and I'll never do that, and I'll never. And to date, I've done pretty much everything I said I'd never do, except maybe needle dope. I never did that, but. It's just because, it just maybe wasn't attractive to me at the time. No particular reason, but for the grace of God. So I began to go throughout my early teenage years and young adult life in these same patterns that I'd learned as a child. And, you know, just to make a really long story short, by the time I was 48 years old, I found myself incarcerated in Davidson County on what I didn't realize then was my 12th DUI.
12. Heavy hitter.
And by now, I've lost my career. I've lost my children. I have 5 beautiful children. I had lost any hope of anything. I was helpless and hopeless. And, you know, we all, a lot of times we'll say, you know, oh, it's just, you know, I'm just hopeless, or I'm just with that. But, you know, when you really get to the point where there isn't any more hope, then what's next? Death? You know, I would have welcomed death a million times. In fact, became suicidal for the last couple of years of my drinking. My focus constantly was to try to think of a way that I could kill myself, that I could take my miserable life from myself, thereby making everyone else's life around me better. So that's the point that my disease had brought me to, is that I was convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that if I could figure out how to kill myself and maybe make it look like an accident, so I wouldn't, you know, further break their hearts, but I would alleviate this thing from their life that constantly hurt them so badly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's just by the grace of God that I was, at that point, became willing to go back to the God of my understanding, which I choose to call Jesus, but and begin to become willing to surrender and to listen to those who'd gone before me, who were successful at staying sober. And, you know, while I wasn't ready to adopt many perceptions about God at that time, I was willing to follow some directions and take some suggestions, and believe that the process worked. I didn't have to believe in God. I didn't have to believe in much of anything at that point in time, but I did have to believe in the process enough to show up, do the things that were suggested to me to do, you know, and before I knew it, you know, my children were coming back into my life.
It's funny how good
I began to have new purpose. My work returned. You know, I just began to have all those things restored in my life that my disease had taken from me. And, you know, a day at a time. It didn't happen overnight. And there's still many things in my life that I'm kicking and screaming about, you know. But today, there isn't anything or anyone or any situation that that is in my life or could come into my life that's worth taking a drink over. Because, you know, my very worst day sober is just a million times better than my best day while I was drinking. Because, you know, I just, like I said, I was hopeless. And had I continued along that path, I'm quite sure, you know, I probably wouldn't have survived one way or another. As we say, you know, I'd already been locked up and nearly covered up, and so, you know, that was the next step. That was,
you brought up a good point, because, you know, you brought back some memories to me. I remember after my last, I guess, you know, bender, you know, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, and I woke up from some dream from hell that I actually thought that this happened to me, and I was sitting on my bed and crying like a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And I just said at that time, it's over. I'm out of here. You know, I'm going to end it, because wherever I'm going can't be as bad as where I am right now. Can't be. You know, can't be. And like you know, but for the grace of God, I took steps to, I'll try one more time. I'll try one more thing, and you know, I went into the 12 steps, and it's funny, you know. This month I celebrated 23 years. You know, I mean, that's just scary.
Yes.
You know, which brings me up to a question I want to ask you about recovery and stuff. It's actually two-part. How did this affect your family? I mean, I think a lot of us recovering folks, when we go into recovery and we get on the pink cloud and we feel good and we go, man, this might work. There's always pros and cons in the family, you know. I'm glad you are trying to help yourself, and you don't need this. Mm-hmm. You know, because my dad said, you don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. You just quit. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes you just can't quit on your own. Right. You know, so I mean, how did that work out for you?
I was very blessed to have a family that, although they may not have understood why I had to go to meetings, why I had to do these things, but they encouraged me. But I know and have had very close friends who have dealt with that kind of thing. You know, they've looked at 12-step programs and groups and activities as just another thing to get addicted to, or, you know, these people are brainwashing you, or all this stuff, you know. All you need is a good church. All you need is and please, I'm not knocking great churches, because I have a wonderful church. But for me, I had to understand
something else.
Yeah, I had to understand that this was my deal. You know, they weren't the ones waking up in the mornings with their head in their hands thinking, why? I'm just stuck for the rest of my life, you know. They didn't come out of the womb with me. They didn't go through the birth canal with me, and more than likely they're not going to go out with me. I have to live in my skin. Mm-hmm. So whatever it takes for me, whether anyone else understands it or not, if I want to live, and I don't mean just survive.
Live.
I want to live. I want joy. Yeah, you know, I want to have a future with hope and joy and excitement and all of that stuff and success. And so I have to do what works for me. If I did for many years what worked for other people. And I was a chameleon, you know, and I was whatever everyone needed me to be, and who I need. You know, I'm serious. I would even speak in another accent if I thought you would be impressed by that. You know what I mean?
You're from England, are you?
Yeah. So I just had to get back down to who. You know, I had no idea who I was anyway, or why I was, and so I just had to really, you know, it's like peeling an onion.
Yeah, it used to be in my house. I used to say, all right, what hat am I going to put on today? You know, who am I going to be today?
And we can only go so long doing that. We can't, you know, we just have this one life here that we know of. And I believe that for me, it's my responsibility to leave just the best footprint behind I can. And for me, that has become about people. You know, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. You know, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Mm-hmm. And that's what I believe. You know, that's my personal belief. But I didn't start out that way. I just started out just, you know, kind of crawling to the meetings and saying, you know, this is better than, you know, waking up in jail. This is better than, you know, it was just a little bit better at the time than all that other stuff. I didn't know if I really bought into it, but just for today, I could. Yeah. You know, I had to hang on to that one day at a time, and still do. When things get overwhelmed, when things overwhelm me, it's generally because, you know, I'm trying to, you know, live in yesterday in regret, or I'm worried about the future. And, you know, we just only have this one day, this one breath. And, you know, so in terms of all that family stuff, I would just say I was blessed to have a very understanding and supportive family. But for those of you who don't, you know, you can have a new family. You know, my family consists of a broad range of people, not just my gene pool, you know. My gene pool family and I fight like cats and dogs, you know, we do. We just never have gotten along, and we may never. But they don't, you know, I have a bigger family today, recovering people who want to help each other and other people and spread the word and you know, have fun. And, you know, so.
Yeah. It's like my buddy told me a long time ago, when you get overwhelmed, you know, he used to say, let the clutch up, pull into the right lane, look in the rearview mirror where you were.
Wow.
How bad is it today?
Oh, that's good. That's good, you know, Jerry. I'll have to remember that.
You can start over anytime you want.
Yes.
But us being stubborn, and that old part of us, it's hard to start all over again.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I have a few words for starting all over again, and they're not pretty, but even with 23 years, it's still difficult.
Yes.
You know, because old habits are tough.
That's true. And you know what? Life's
And then
tough.
all of a sudden, you know, like 2 hours later, you go, man, all I had to do was just chill.
I know.
But at the time, you know, and those are the things we have to know, because we never had to deal with that before. Right. Because we could always stay in that crapola, you know, because everybody around us was in it.
Numb out.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we're fortunate enough to live long enough, the numbing out ceases to be effective, and then it becomes a thing like no matter how much we drink or how much dope we do, or we can't numb out anymore.
No.
Wherever we go, there we are, and all that stuff. And, you know, then, you know, once we start depleting our resources, then we don't have the money to do. So then what do? We bum. We become, then, and, you know, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And, you know, and the bottom line, too, is life is tough, any way you slice it.
One of the Four Noble Life is Suffering. Yeah.
That's right.
You learn how to deal with it.
But, you know, the thing that, one of the great things I've learned really just in the past couple of years, I've really put this into practice, is deliberately choosing joy. Now, whatever that means at the moment, you know, may be different from time to time. Sometimes deliberately choosing joy is to sing a song. It might be take a bubble bath. It might be read a great book. It might be watch an old movie. It might be take a walk. It might be, you know, go to a meeting. It might be go to the jail and you know, look at my girls there that I go up there and minister to and say, you know what? This don't have to take you.
That's right.
You know, look at me. I'm, you know.
Yeah.
And I have received such strength from those things. But you know, it's a program of action, Jerry. You can't sit around and just, you know.
You just can't sit around and say, okay, I'm sober.
Yeah.
You know, you got to do something.
You got to do something.
You got to give back.
Yeah.
You know, you got to try to help the sick and suffering addict. You know, my buddy told me a long time, if you can't help an addict, never hurt one. You know, because you're not walking in his or her shoes.
Right.
You know, we know from experience what it feels like to be sitting on a dime and swinging your legs, right?
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
we know. We know.
I've used that several times.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it's just a lonely feeling.
Oh.
And just to think back from April 1st in 1988, wherever it was, to today, you know, the things that have happened in my life, you know, and one of the greatest things was, you know, it was an unfortunate trip, but I ended up in Virginia, in Bristol, Virginia, you know, being from Boston. And these last 9 or 10 years, it just...
It stepped off into another dimension, didn't you?
Other than the food, man, you know, I don't miss it back there. I'll go back, you know, and visit my pals and stuff, and I always say I'm going to stay for a couple of weeks. But I always head up to Maine to see my buddy, you know, because Maine reminds me of down here. And then I never stay the 2 weeks. I just get back here, you know. I mean, I was born down here, but maybe that's what it is, you know. Maybe I, you know, in recovery or whatever, I finally found home, you know, and I met some wonderful people, and get back into music, you know, wrote a book, you know, cut a CD.
And we all, you know, I tell you.
I can't do that on the bar stool.
No. Alcoholics and addicts are some of the most creative people I have ever seen in my life. sometimes I go into the jails and prisons, you know, and when I was there, I saw a good bit of it. But I'm telling you what, because as we know, the largest percentage of people in jail are there because they're in bondage to alcoholism and addiction. They're not criminals, they're addicts.
78% of the people incarcerated in this country because of alcoholism or drug addiction.
And you can go in there and see the most beautiful artwork. You could see, I'm telling you what, it's amazing. And you know, we're just tender-hearted people. You know, we're egomaniacs with inferiority complex. We're just, you know, and I don't know about you, but by the time that I was old enough to start my rage party, you know, I just was, I had to always feel like that I was perfect just in order to feel adequate. Nothing I ever did was right in my mind. You know, I just never had a sense of completion. I never had a sense of belonging. I never had a sense of anything like that until I took that first drink. And then everything, you know. So that's what the big lie is, the false sense of well-being that it gives us. And essentially what it's doing is beginning a poisoning process of our mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. And it just, you know, it begins with that false thing of you're accepted. You know, you spoke about the loneliness. You know, I can be lonely now without being hopeless. And before, you know what I'm saying?
That's good.
And if I don't want, and sometimes I choose to be lonely because, you know, sometimes we just have to bathe in that stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, if I can't get to a meeting, I've got a telephone.
That's right.
There are meetings online. There's always someone that I can reach out to. And speaking of family, you know, before I became into the family of the 12-step programs, I didn't have anybody I could pick up the phone and call that wouldn't, well, if you hadn't done the baby, or if you just did, well, you're just like this one or that one or the other, you know. I already know all that. You know, I just need a shoulder right now. Yeah. But
and that's the wonderful thing about recovery. There's shoulders everywhere.
Yes.
You could meet, and I'm sure it's happened to you by just a coincidence. You just say, hypothetically, you're at Walmart and you bump into some guy, and all of a sudden you start talking, and he's a 12-stepper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden you have a meeting.
You'd be surprised.
And it's the only time. It's probably the only time in your life that you'll walk out of Walmart feeling good.
Yeah, for sure. I just was talking about that. We don't want to get too specific, but come on.
You know.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, another question. How is your music affected today, now that you're sober?
Oh, well, it's completely affected.
Because I know you're an award-winning songwriter and singer-songwriter.
I've been very blessed and fortunate in my career and have, you know, been awarded. But I would just say that, you know, all my music now has purpose instead of just, you know, rhyme and rhythm. I mean, it really is inspired by the God of my understanding. I see them as gifts. They're all very message-driven. You know,
like changes.
Some are fun, some are sad.
Change Me. Oh, what a song. What a song.
Thank you.
It's just a great song.
But I just, you know, like I said, I mean, I just can't get over the gifts that have come through recovery, and part of it is the renewing of my music. You know, I went for about 4 years, I guess, and didn't even write a song.
Really? Ooh.
And it was kind of like, you know, it was bad.
Yeah.
But as I began to, you know, get stronger in my recovery, I started to write again, and wow, lots of great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that now that I can, there's more up here than there used to be, you know, because there just used to be heroin and cocaine and meth and hash and pills and alcohol.
Or
because
whatever
everything that was the focus of the day.
Sure.
And today I wake up and you know, I have a purpose to do stuff. And here we are. It's over again. I mean, you know, this is. We're going to have an hour show here. You brought your axe with you.
I
huh?
did. I never go anywhere without
Are
it.
you going to do a tune?
I could.
Well, I suppose she is because she brought it. What are we doing today?
Well, I think that I'll do a song that I wrote. Well, it was during a period of time that I began to discover, who I was and why I was. But it's called, ironically, Have Another Drink.
Have another drink.
You're a big success, the company's best, so the boss took you out for a couple rounds. But he's been long gone, you should have gone home before the town started closing down. You just wanted one more, just like the one before. It won't hurt a thing. If that's what you think, have another drink. She cries while she waits, you miss the school play, and she and your dinner are cold again. You got a good explanation, it was a celebration, and her anger just doesn't make any sense. You bring the paycheck home, why won't she leave you alone? You haven't done a thing. If that's what you think, have another drink. 'Cause it takes a lifetime to build a foundation and a moment to tear it down. If you're not paying attention, one fatal decision can bring it tumbling down. And you're well on your way, everybody knows, but you've got it under control. If that's what you think, have another drink. There's a knock at the door, the witness is sure. They said it was a terrible sight. Now a child lay dying, and you're desperately trying to remember what happened last night. And your head is aching, they must be mistaken. You didn't do a thing. You just need a little time to think and another drink. Well, it takes a lifetime to build a foundation and a moment to tear it down. If you're not paying attention, one fatal decision can bring it tumbling down. And you're well on your way, everybody knows, but you've got it under control. If that's what you think, have another drink. If that's what you really think, have another drink.
My, that was powerful. Wow. Wow. That had me going into the rearview mirror.
Well, it's always there. It's always there. And I tell you, that song actually was written during a time that before I was ready to completely surrender. You know, I've always known that I was an alcoholic. I knew from the first time that I drank and went into a blackout. And I always tell people, I always knew, I just really didn't care. You know, so when I began to care, you know, my biggest obstacle was the God thing. I was so angry at God. I was angry.
Yeah.
I used to say, I don't have a problem believing, I just don't like him.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Been there, done that.
just so thankful that all that changed. And, you know, if I make it till June of this year, I'll have 5 years.
Yay. Well, folks,
For today.
another quick half hour. I'm going to have to barter to my boss to give me an hour show. But I'll end this show just like I end them all. If you're out there and you're having a problem with alcoholism or drug addiction and you're not doing anything about it, you're just spreading the disease.
Check, stop the misery, go get yourself straight.